Muy buenos días y bienvenidos a Build the Americas.
Good morning and welcome to Build the Americas, infrastructure linkages for economic recovery in Central America and the Caribbean. Today's event has simultaneous interpretation into Spanish and English. In order to access the interpretation service, please click on the globe item icon in the lower part of your screen. We request all participants to please keep their audio and video turned off during the event in order to prevent interruptions and make the event easier. Throughout these sessions, you will hear from the execution agencies and IDB specialists the details of 24 important tenders financed by the bank, which will be open within the next 2 years. In the afternoon, there will be a business round in which major developers of infrastructure projects will be able to connect with local providers. We invite you to take part and book your meetings if you haven't yet done so. This round will take place between 1 and 6 p.m. Eastern US time. We'll be dealing with tenders in 7 countries in Central America and the Caribbean, and this will be divided into 3 segments. We'll start with a few opening remarks by Fernando Quevedo, the head of the CID countries for the IDB, which includes Haiti, Mexico, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. After which, we'll move on to the segment 1 tenders and hear more about tenders in El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. This will be followed a few minutes later, after 10:40 Washington time, in segment 2 with tenders in Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. We will wrap up with presentations in a third segment that will kick off at 11:05 with tenders in Panama and Guatemala in order to conclude around 11:30 our presentations. We will now hear the opening remarks by Fernando Quevedo. Good morning. On behalf of the IDB, I would like to welcome you to this 3rd edition of Build the Americas. This is a major event which has been taking place since 2021, as part of which we try to attract important companies from around the world, from Central America and the Caribbean, in order to enhance competitiveness and foster the creation of infrastructure in the region. Today, we have representatives of governments such as Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and the Dominican Republic, in addition to IDB specialists who have been working to present today 24 tenders amounting to $325 million across such sectors as infrastructure, energy, the social sectors. We have police offices, hospitals, schools, a host of different investments that will offer participation opportunities. And we consider this very important. One of the things we try to encourage is competitiveness. The more competitiveness exists in all of these tenders, the better options will be available to the countries we are seeking to support. This is why this exercise is truly very useful for the countries and businesses that are participating. A big thanks to the colleagues from the Trade and Integration Department, as well as the CID colleagues from Central America, who have been preparing this meeting for the benefit of our countries. Thank you very much. We thank Fernando Quevedo for those opening remarks and for the clear explanation regarding the importance of events such as Build the Americas for economic recovery in Central America and the Caribbean. Now, a brief explanation on the dynamics of the event. Each tender will be presented in the plenary session, which is where we now are, and this will be about 5 and 8 minutes. At the end of each presentation, the members of the audience who wish to do so may go into a breakout room for 15 minutes to ask questions of the presenter by clicking on the icon, as you will see on the screen. Each breakout room will have an IDB moderator that will choose the chat questions to be answered. At the end of the 15 minutes, the participants will be invited to return to the plenary session. If, as a result of being in a breakout room, you've missed the presentation of another tender of interest to you, no worries. All of the event will be recorded and you'll be able to watch that later. May we remind you that in order to take part in the breakout rooms, you must have the latest Zoom app version downloaded to your computer. This functionality is not available for the Zoom web version through your search engine. And finally, on the event page, as you will see on the screen, you will be able to find the instructions on the proceedings today, the agenda, and time of presentations. In addition, the fact sheets of the tenders presented, both in English and Spanish, as well as more information on Build the Americas and links to download the application. As from next week, all recordings of both the plenary sessions and breakout rooms will also be available. Let us now begin with the presentation of segment 1 tenders. We will kick off with 2 projects relating to El Salvador, and they will be presented by Juan Ernesto Maragall on behalf of the IDB. So, Juan Ernesto, the floor is yours. Good morning. We'll be presenting 2 tenders as part of the Nacer, Crecer y Aprender program in El Salvador, which has a significant component relating to the increase in school coverage. This will involve 10 educational establishments in a first stage, and the amount will be $10 million. It should be noted that this is the first tender out of several of them to be conducted. Victor Jimenez is also with us. He's involved in the project, and we expect to have tenders for 60 educational establishments, and the details will be coming out in the next 6 months. The projects are about expanding schools by building 1 or 2 additional classrooms for them to add preschool education, and also, as part of that, generally improve the infrastructure. And this will include the repair of roofs, also rehabilitating the electrical systems, drainage, water systems. So the idea is not just to enlarge, but also to fully rehabilitate the schools. Let's look at the next tender. This is part of the same program, and it involves 4 educational establishments, which are in pretty bad shape structurally, so they will be pulled down and rebuilt. The design is already there and will be tendering for the construction of the 4 educational establishments, and the amount will again be $10 million. The tenders will also be divided into lots, so awards may involve all 4 schools or an individual school, depending on the applications we may receive. So these are the 2 basic infrastructure projects we'll be dealing with. So the idea, again, is to tender for up to 80 projects in the next 6 months. So thanks, Luis. So that would be the end of our presentation for now. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to ask questions of the presenter, they may now go into breakout room number 1. In the meantime, we'll stay here in our main room with the next presentation. This is a tender in Honduran that will be presented by Carlos Rodriguez, representing the executing agency. Go ahead, Carlos, please. Thank you. Good morning. The bank, as part of its financing, is providing support to Honduras in digital transformation for greater competitiveness. And the financing includes three components. One is connectivity for schools and hospitals. The other one has to do with state efficiency by digitalizing government agencies. And the third component has to do precisely with the digital economy. And this includes, among other things, the strengthening of some entrepreneurship labs in Tegucigalpa. The tender is basically about the design of a digital innovation district in the city of San Pedro Sula. This is a unique project in the country, and we think it is very impactful for the city. Some progress has already been made in terms of the studies for the master plan and construction. There's a project profile in place, which the consulting firm will get information on the background. The mayor's office will be involved as well. There's overall design, and the firm will have to flesh out the design, but the environmental consultancy data is available. The amount is $12.8 million, and obviously considerations involve both cost and quality, and the tender will be published in April 2023. This digital district intends to create opportunities for creation and entrepreneurship to offer access to a population segment in San Pedro Sula that has their needs and don't currently have sufficient opportunities to interact or learn about other techniques and skills that might help them along the way. So that's basically it. Thank you very much, Carlos. Those wishing to go on with the discussion of this tender are now invited to join breakout room 2. We will now move on to another presentation involving Hondurans as well. The presenter will this time be Carlos Espinal on behalf of the executing agency. Carlos, over to you. I think
buenos días.
the
Director ejecutivo se excusa en este momento.
Executive Director presents their apologies. We will be presenting a tender relating to the construction of rooms in the healthcare sector. We are talking about ICU rooms in different parts of the country. This involves 3 tenders. Here you will see the amount stated as 18.6 million, but we have 3 tenders that will be running as from November. Possibly the publication date will be April 2023. We've lost audio. This involves neonatal ICU rooms in the hospitals of San Francisco, Santa Teresa, Comayagua, Occidente, and the Tegucigalpa Hospital School. We are looking at an amount of $24,486,922.
Muchas gracias, doctora. Todos
Thank you very much.
que
And
necesiten conocer más detalles sobre esta licitación.
Anyone wishing to get more details on this tender is invited to now join breakout room number 3.
Damos espacio a la última
Now
presentación.
we will move on to the last presentation for this segment. This is a tender in Nicaragua to be presented by Santiago Bermudez on behalf of the executing agency.
Adelante, Santiago.
Go ahead, please, Santiago. Thank you very much, Luis Fernando. Good morning, everyone. In Nicaragua, the geothermal sector potential is a little over 1,500 megawatts. We have a lot of studies underway, including the program involving the Cosiguina volcano. This is an exploration project. It's about drilling 3 commercial-sized wells to verify the existence of the reservoir of the vapor in the on site to be able to obtain electricity energy. The wells will be drilled on the foothills of the volcano. The depth will be about 2,500 meters, and this project will generate 140 jobs and some 60 indirect jobs. This project will contribute to climate change mitigation, since the purpose is to generate energy in a renewable way without having a negative impact. Droughts, hurricanes will not get in the way. This is a very reliable energy source, and we hope to afford stability to our energy grid. This will be by means of an international public tender, which we expect the tender documents to be published very soon. We expect to receive the offers by December of 2022, and the procuring agency is the Ministry of Energy and Mines. We look forward to the participation of several businesses, and we are looking at $28.3 million as part of the procurement plan. And this will, as I said, involve the foothills of a volcano in a natural reservation where geothermal is not, well, obviously the permits will be available to the tender awardees, and they will have all of the logistical facilities offered to them as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Santiago. Anyone wishing to carry on the conversation with Santiago in relation to this tender will be invited to join breakout room number 1 at this point. With this, we conclude the first segment presentations, and now we'll take a short break for about 7 minutes, 8 minutes, let's say, here on our main stage, and we'll be coming back at 10:30 Washington, D.C. time for the second segment, tenders. Thank you very much.
Bienvenidos nuevamente a Build the Americas.
Welcome back to Build the Americas, linking infrastructure for the economic recovery in Central America and the Caribbean. The mobile app that's available both in iOS as well as Android provides very important information on the next acquisitions related to infrastructure financed by the IDB. And it facilitates the connection between developers all over the world and local providers of goods and services for each one of these projects. Next, we will present a brief video on the virtues of this important tool and how it can be useful to be able to proceed with this very important process of disseminating the information about these procurement processes. Let's go ahead with the video.
¿Cómo puede ayudar el BID a incrementar la...
How can the IDB improve competitiveness in infrastructure bids in the Latin American Caribbean region, expanding transparency on public procurement, facilitating contact with local providers? Build the Americas. Learn about future infrastructure bids financed by the IDB. Share with friends and colleagues. Save bids and get notices on changes in budget amounts and schedules, notifications from vendors and partners, search and connect with potential local providers. Look for local providers broken down by country or industry. Reinventing the way to connect to global developers of infrastructure with Latin American and Caribbean providers. Build the Americas.
Muchas gracias por el video.
Thank you very much for the video. Before we move on, I'd like to remind you that today's session has simultaneous interpretation available into English and Spanish. To access the feature, click on the globe icon found on the bottom right-hand side of your Zoom screen and select your language of your preference from the pop-up window. We'd like to ask everyone to turn off your microphone and camera to avoid any disruptions during the course of the event. If you just joined us, in this session, you will learn directly from executing agencies and Inter-American Development Bank specialists on bids or tenders from Latin America or Central America and the Caribbean financed by the IDB. Once each presentation ends, any audience members interested in posing questions to the presenter will be invited to go to the corresponding breakout room. Lastly, on the event's website that you can see on screen, you will find information on instructions and the process that we will use during the course of today's event, the agenda, the schedule for the presentations, and the bids will be presented both in English and Spanish, or they will be available. You could also find the lid to Building the Americas on the website. At the conclusion of this week, by next week, you will have recordings available of all of the sessions so that you can access them at your leisure. As you can see, we will begin with this block with a presentation of a tender from Costa Rica, and we will be introducing Eduardo Arquedo from the executing agency who will give us this presentation. Eduardo, you have the floor. Thank you, Luis Fernando. It's a pleasure to be here. Colleagues, good day to you. We have a project in Costa Rica that involves a street project. Could we move on to the next slide? Thank you. It's a project with an estimated budget of $9.7 million in Costa Rica. This is on the international scale with an international public open bid process. We are towards the end of the proposal analysis stage. The publication date is geared for August of this year. The idea is to build a new street with adequate pedestrian and mobility infrastructure, which is very important for us in Costa Rica, and it will be connecting a free zone in Coyol, which is a very important area in our country, with other locations. And so we are providing pedestrian pathways as well as vehicle pathways, as well as lateral streets. And we will also be upgrading the drainage systems, additionally rainwater collection systems, lighting systems, and other fiber optic systems that we deem to be very important. The fiber optic infrastructure is particularly important for this industrial sector. This is a local project that has been worked with the local municipal government and the Ministry of Public Works and Transportation from Real Cantonal. And this involves the municipal streets system, and this is the most important street that will connect with the La Abuela area. And we wanted to build this to create a healthy area in which all of the pedestrian areas that connect the industrial system with the La Abuela area in such a way that it'll be a very pleasant space for both workers as well as visitors to Costa Rica. With that, and of course, the loan that we will be receiving from the Inter-American Development Bank puts the financing on the order of 45% of the total budget allocated for this project. And Fernando, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Now I'd like to invite anyone who would like to discuss this project with the presenter to go to breakout room number 2. Next, we will hear about 2 other bids or tenders from Costa Rica, but this one will be presented by Diego Solano from the executing agency. Go ahead, Diego. Good morning, Luis Fernando. And good morning to all the participants joining us today. For the Citizen Security and Violence Prevention Program, it's important for us to have this opportunity today to strengthen the transparency and also strengthen a broad participation by different companies in the projects that we are planning to develop or that are currently developing at the present time. Our program is divided into 2 main components related to citizen security and safety. And one of the objectives includes contributing to a reduction in incidents of violence, improving law enforcement facilities for prevention of crimes. And we want to address many issues related to young people. For this purpose, we've built a technical team, and we addressed this project over 2 rounds, one involving law enforcement action and violence prevention efforts. So we need infrastructure that will be headed by me. We conducted the proper planning and development having to do with the construction efforts. At the beginning, we developed a design that we've been working on and upgrading for each one of the projects that will be incorporated during the subsequent construction phase. In this way, the focus on infrastructure divides the projects into two basic thematic areas. One of them, which is what we see here, relates to civic centers for peace. And a second component that I will describe later relates to law enforcement facilities. In terms of these civic centers, the program has clustered the public works part of this based on projects. So these civic centers involve the construction of 8 civic centers in different regions of the country, and these are grouped into 3 packets,
estarían publicándose, según las
which
proyecciones,
will be published according to our estimates for the construction phases by March of 2023 and February of 2024. On the slide, we can see a summary of the total number of projects. Altogether, the budget is approximately $20 million. Nevertheless, each packet has a grouping of these civic centers, and these include 2 civic centers with a budget allocation on the order of $4 million.
y un tercer paquete,
And a third project with other civic centers with the budget allocation of approximately $5 million. In this way, with these interventions, we will be improving our infrastructure, providing a better quality infrastructure for young people and children that find themselves in very vulnerable conditions, in very vulnerable areas in our country. Associated with this infrastructure, we also have the program development with different components, which are a key structural component of the overall program. So next slide, Luis Fernando. Thank you very much. Likewise, with the various police stations construction project, the program has the goal of developing 35 police facilities in different regions of the country. And these contracting processes, including the construction, because currently we're in the design phase, are projected to be executed between May of 2023 and June of 2024. These are the timelines that we have for the publications of these projects. Now, we conducted a process here to divide the different public works packets, and we broke them down into 5, the first of which is already underway, and we still have 4 remaining packets distributed in a second and third packet with 7 police stations with a budget of $6.5 million, a fourth packet with 10 stations with a budget of $14 million, and another packet with 9 police stations budgeted at $13 million. The total investment for the program in law enforcement infrastructure is on the order of $40 million, which is a little bit more than what appears on the slide, but we've added additional packets. As I stated, each packet has a certain amount of facilities, and we decided to group these or carry them out individually depending on the bidding process. All of these are projected to be handled as international bids with the budget amounts that we have available. This is law enforcement infrastructure, and it's infrastructure that we would like to make more modular. And this is to optimize their function, especially in terms of the design and the operational phase. These would be delegations that would be at the service of all the communities where these public works will be carried out. By and large, the program, as I mentioned earlier, is currently in the design phase, and we've already shared some procurement processes which have been published in the different media, both in the bank as well as local media and the Ministry of Justice or the public procurement platforms that are used by the government in our country. The idea is to maintain a broad participation geared towards all areas, ranging from the construction to the consulting process. And this is very important for us to be able to participate in today's session, to inform everyone about our project and to inquire if anybody wants to participate in accordance with bank policies. And in that way, we could carry out this program successfully with the utmost transparency and effectiveness in terms of executing the available resources. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diego. We invite any audience members who would like to discuss this project and pose questions to Diego to go to breakout room number 3. In the main room, we welcome Carlos Vasquez, representing the executing agency that will provide information about a public tender in the Dominican Republic. Go ahead, Carlos. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here. In the case of the professional, technical, and art program in the Dominican Republic and its improvement, we have a project for technical improvement for schools that will be converted to technology educational centers. This requires the development of technical science shops or workshops. These are modules that will be built on existing facilities. Much of the work will involve expansion efforts to existing facilities. The project contemplates the conversion of 40 schools, the first group, which is the first international tender or bid that we will be carrying out, and that we expect that will go out at the beginning of next year. The publication date appears on the slide, but at present we are still in the technical design and budgeting phase, and we have projected that we may be able to push up the date to February of 2023 before we publish the international tender, with 14 schools that we will be converted into institutes of technology. And this with a budget allocation of approximately $14 to $16 million. The schools that will be undergoing the conversion are located in different provinces in the Dominican Republic, and each one of them will be grouped with other schools in the same area. That's the overall information related to the project.
Solamente para agregar que
just to elaborate a little bit further, in addition to the overall presentation, thank you, Carlos. It's also important to mention that we spoke today about the construction of certain shops. These are simple shops. We're not talking about the construction of new institutes of technologies, but rather the construction involves existing schools, and it involves a conversion to technical schools. And that's why we need to expand the facilities to include different types of shops or labs. And we're talking about these efforts in many locations in the entire country, and we're going to be undergoing this process by clustering these existing facilities. Thank you very much. Anybody who would like to discuss this project with the presenters can go to breakout room number 1. So with this, we end this segment. I remind everyone that all of the rooms will be recorded and they will be available for future reference. After a couple of minutes of break, we will come back to listen to the bids or tenders in Block 3 for infrastructure projects in the Central American and Caribbean regions.
Bienvenidos nuevamente a
Welcome
Build
back to Build the Americas, linking infrastructure for the economic recovery of Central America and the Caribbean. Before we continue, I'd like to remind everyone that today's session has simultaneous interpretation available into English and Spanish. To access this feature, you can click on the globe icon on the bottom right-hand side of your Zoom screen and select the language of your preference. We'd like to ask everyone to turn off their audio and video during the course of the event to avoid disruptions. If you're just joining us now, you'll learn directly from executing agencies and IDB specialists about tenders or bids financed by the IDB in the Central American Caribbean region. When the presentations conclude, members of the audience interested in posing questions to the presenter will be invited to click on the assigned breakout room so you can have access to those presenters and submit your questions. Lastly, we'd like to remind you that on the event's website, you'll find instructions on today's process, the agenda, and the schedule for the presentations. The various data sheets for the bids will be available both in English and in Spanish. Additionally, information regarding the links to access the bids will be available. We will begin today with the presentations related to the tenders or bids for Block 3. We have 2 bids from Panama, and Alejandro Lopez will be presenting on behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank. Go ahead, Alejandro. Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I simply wanted to make a very brief introduction because these tenders or bids are part of the support program for conserving and preserving the national and cultural heritage of Panama, and this involves a couple of very large loans, one with the Ministry of Culture and the other one with the Ministry of the Environment. This is a large operation with a budget allocation of $107 million, and each one of these tenders are extremely important as part of this framework. For this purpose, I would like to yield the floor to the team coordinator representing the culture program, Yesenia Sanchez, so that she can make the first presentation about the emergency works in the areas of San Jerónimo de Portobelo and the district of Portobelo. And subsequently, we will have Eudis or Valeria from the Ministry of Culture on behalf of the coordinator, Andrea, who will be making their presentation. And of course, in the breakout room, we will show you photographs and we'll be able to discuss the program with you so that you could come away with a better idea of what both bids involve. So Valeria, I yield the floor to you. Thank you very much. Hello, good morning. Forgive me. Apologies, but the audio has been interrupted. Alejandro, we can't hear you. Forgive me, I was saying that this is the Mi Cultura project. Forgive me, it's Yesenia who will be presenting first, and she will be followed by Valeria. Yesenia, if you please. Hello, Alejandro. Thank you. Good morning. Well, our architect, the director in charge of our cultural heritage project, the architect Isela, will be presenting the description. If you have any technical questions, she can answer it at any time. Isela.
No está conectada.
She appears to not be connected. Otherwise, Yesenia, perhaps you can make the presentation and we could discuss this in greater detail in the breakout room. Isela is telling me that her microphone won't turn on, Isela Quiroz, or she's not allowed to turn on her microphone. Can you help me with that, Alejandro?
Yo no la veo en la lista de participantes.
I can't see her on the participant list to be able to enable her microphone, but everyone can unmute themselves. I think, Yesenia, we should just go ahead and do a brief explanation of the data sheet. And as Alejandro said, we could go on to the breakout room for any questions and answers. Very well.
Portobelo and San Lorenzo, at the moment, we're about to tender for two international bidding processes. One is in Portobelo district in Panama province towards the Atlantic, and the other one is San Fernando fort, which is across the bay. We hope to put out the tender in October, but now it's being pushed back to November. I'll just finish off this fact sheet and then hand it over to Isela. The publication will probably be available on our procurement portal in November. These are two international tenders, as I was saying, and our bidding documents provide for the rehabilitation of documents which are world cultural heritage. They need to meet certain UNESCO standards, and we are very specific in the documents in terms of key personnel and their expertise, as well as that of the companies that will be involved in the tenders. We also include an amount of resources to demonstrate the capability of the company for these kinds of projects, as well as the background regarding contracts for similar projects. So the procuring entity would be the Ministry of Culture, and as I said, it'll be an international tender. Alejandro, we can move on to the next slide, which contains some of the more specific details.
Porque acabo de explicar un resumen de las dos. Ajá.
This will just skip and let Valeria talk about the second one. And then in the breakout room, we can talk to anyone interested in greater detail. Hello, thanks for the opportunity to speak about the project on the study, design, construction, and rehabilitation of administrative and support facilities in Gambute, the National Park of Coiba. This is a major protected area, and this procurement envisages $7.5 million. It is an international tender in Panama, and it'll be an international public tender. The idea being for the bidders to offer eco-friendly, innovative alternatives for this flagship project involving our National Park of Coiba. And of course, all of the national standards on environmental impact will apply in order for this kind of project to take place. The goal being to rehabilitate the area while at the same time making it possible for the facilities to be much more attractive. The intended publication date is December of this year or January of next year. This requires UNESCO approval. All of the terms of reference provide for this, and we think that by March we will have everything finalized. That's the end of the presentation. Thanks, Alejandro, Yesenia, Valeria, for the presentation. We'd now like to invite you to go into breakout room number 2 for further discussion. Now, on our main stage, we welcome Inicio Córdoba from the executing agency, who will tell us about a tender in Guatemala. Go ahead, please. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you. With IDB funds and a contract, we are developing a program for the modernization of the public prosecutor's office. And this includes a number of components, one of which is the enlargement of the headquarters of the Office of the Public Prosecutor in Zona 1 in Guatemala. And the headquarters will add a third building. There is a lot which is being set aside for this purpose. The executing agency is independent in nature, and this is a different track to that of the ministry. So the work is done independently when it comes both to the procurement and to the payments. Having said this, the international publication date is set as March 2023, but before that, the opening will take place following a pre-qualification of potential bidders, which allows for evaluation so that when we have the international tender for the construction, things will flow more smoothly. You are, of course, invited to participate, and the pre-qualification has a deadline next month on November 21st. So it is important for any potential bidders to pre-qualify. This is open to the public. We have our publications on the government business publication, as well as international newspapers, where we also list the tender. And if you're interested, we can also send you the bidding specifications for you to register. That said, as I already mentioned, the deadline for receiving the bids for the actual tender for the project is May 2023. And it is quite an important project for us because the estimated amount is $37.5 million. We are looking at an 8-tier building with an additional level for the machines and equipment, in addition to the offices, among others. So we are looking at an estimated for 24,000 square meters of the construction surface area. Next slide. This is not really the one. But we can show this in the breakout rooms anyway.
Muchísimas gracias,
Thank
Vinicio.
you so much.
Invitamos ahora a acceder al breakout room número 3.
And the invitation stands for breakout room number 3 for anyone who might have specific questions on this tender. And now we'll move on to today's final tender. And Mr. Vasquez, representing the executing agency, will present yet another tender in Guatemala. This is indeed a pleasure to be with you today, and it is my pleasure to present the projects we have with the Health Ministry that are intended to improve the third level health care networks. This project is part of the program for strengthening the institutional healthcare services network, one of the aims of which is to reduce maternal and infant mortality in the Guatemalgo and San Martin departments by modernizing the network nationwide to offer high quality and efficient services. The projects span a number of categories. 4 are actual enhancement projects in the Malacatan hospital. We have 2 new hospitals in the department of San Marcos, and then we have another 2 50-bed hospitals. Apart from the hospital projects, there's a permanent health care center and another one in the capital city in Guatemala. And these projects amount in total to some $55 million, which includes the construction and the equipment for each of them. The contract type will involve two modes for the refurbishment. It'll be design and construction. For the new hospitals, it'll be the, as well as for the permanent care center, it'll be the traditional method with final design and then the actual construction. The intended date for publication of the tender for the new projects is October of next year. And we are now working to finalize the terms and conditions for the first pre-investment phase, so that for those that involve design and construction, we'll have a master plan, and for the new hospitals, we'll have the final design, after which we'll move on to the tender. And the idea is that the projects will contribute to the creation of jobs as part of the construction of the new hospitals, which will require human resources, not only in construction, but also to commission the hospital. And the idea is also to have economically active population segments who will enjoy better health conditions, and that will in turn have a positive impact economically. So those are the projects we are planning with the Health Ministry and supported by bank financing, and they are intended to take place over the course of next year. Thank you very much, Annette. Anyone interested may start the discussion in breakout room number 1. And this brings us to the end of today's event. All of the rooms will be recorded and available to the public on the events webpage as from next week. We'd like to thank you for joining us today, and we do hope this will have been useful. Thank you to the presenters and all the best with your projects, and to the companies, also a deep appreciation. And we encourage you to take part in these tenders for important projects that will improve lives in countries in Central America and the Caribbean. And please remember to go to www.connectamericas.com for more details on the initiative and to download the mobile app. We hope to see you at future events. All the very best to all of you in the and those of you in the business round as from 1 p.m. Washington, D.C. time. Well, and all of the best. Have a great afternoon.